versus the world. Today, the SEC home opener, and the Tide's pride certainly overflowing as the faithful embrace new heroes wearing legendary old numbers. An intense week of build-up. Bama versus Georgia.
What do you think this is coffee break? Let's go. Alabama! Crimson Tide!
The kids look up to people like Tyler Watt.
Good job, good job, good job.
Boyle rolls left, looking for Zach Fletcher in the end zone. Touchdown!
I'd like to think home field's going to be a little bit of an advantage.
Roll Tide, roll! We're gonna beat the hell out of you. Never give a hell, never give a hell.
College Game Day is presented by Discover Card, proud sponsor of college football's premier pregame show.
That is a classic collegiate setting on the quad here in Tuscaloosa, just a stone's throw from Bryant-Denny Stadium. Georgia, Bama, the SEC home opener for the Crimson Tide. Only our second visit ever to Tuscaloosa, but this doesn't quite feel like the UCLA Bruins are in town. A little bit different.
Yeah, this is
Chris
good.
Fowler, Lee Corso, Kirk Herbstreit, Tony Barnhart joins us. Special guest Herschel Walker, Sean Alexander, Dennis Francione. It's a big weekend down here. T-Town has college football. Talladega has the NASCAR. I know better than ask you guys what to expect on the oval, but what do you expect in the gridiron today?
Well, Chris, I'm anxious to see if number 2 Texas and number 3 Oklahoma can focus in on the two opponents they're favored to beat today. The reason why, if they beat those two football teams that they're favored to beat, then they set up, quote unquote, the game of the year next week in beautiful downtown Dallas.
And we'll be there.
Yeah,
We'll look forward to that one. You know, as this season moves into October, we're going to start to see things begin to define themselves. We're going to learn more about teams beginning today. Teams like Tennessee, teams like Arkansas, Oregon on the road for the first time, Penn State on the road, and yes, today, Georgia and Alabama. Who is the better football team? Chris, up to this point, it's really been about kind of jockeying for position, but now, slowly, the cream will begin to rise in this season. We're going to find out who the legitimate teams are.
Right.
Well, Bama defined Arkansas last week, and that didn't work out too well for the Hogs. You guys will define Georgia and Alabama coming up here. Strong emotions in South Bend on both sidelines, Stanford and Notre Dame. We'll talk about that game. And the other storylines today, Coach mentioned it. The season-defining showdown in Big D, but only if the Sooners Longhorns avoid the upset. OU's got to find a running game. We'll see about that Texas defense against Okie State's weapons today. Meanwhile, the fledgling football team from a great basketball school gave us an all-access pass as they assumed the all-time giant killer role today at Miami. And the best in the West defense of USC takes aim on another potent quarterback. Can Carroll's crew smother Jason Gesser, a crucial Pac-10 collision? And, of course, right here, a rare meeting in the SEC. Georgia from the East, Alabama off last weekend's woodshed win. Looks like the best in the West. Alabama, of course, not eligible for postseason play, but therefore treating each game as precious, guarding against the letdown, pulling together. They have to handle praise and hype. Sometimes that's tougher to handle than adversity. Georgia, as the lone remaining SEC unbeaten, praised by the pollsters with their highest ranking in 14 years. But do the Dogs deserve it? Even the Dogs players wonder that. It's based more on potential so far than performance. Georgia alum, ex-Auburn head coach Pat Dye, he really stoked things this week on a radio show, saying 3 times, perhaps with an ulterior motive, that Georgia wasn't man enough to stand up to Alabama.
That kind of got us fired up a little bit, and gives us a little extra incentive to go out there and play on Saturday. And, you know, it's going to be a good test for us. And we'll see.
Georgia has never beaten Alabama in Tuscaloosa, ever. So, you know, it'd be nice to make history instead of repeat history, you know, for us. So I'm sure all those things will be a factor. But again, once the battle begins, it's just a matter of who's going to make the plays.
They have made enough plays to be 4-0 despite the 89th rated offense, last in the SEC. 3 games against 1A, they have not reached 300 yards. They got all those veteran offensive linemen, but no running game to speak of. Receivers dropping 10 passes against New Mexico State. The Dogs players call this startling. Carl Torbush, for Bama defensive coordinator, hoping this is not a ticking time bomb. Pat Dye both cheered and booed by kind of calling out Georgia. Are they man enough? We'll talk more about that. Bama, we know, I think, is man enough.
Well, I think we do know. The thing that's really impressed me about Alabama this year is their resiliency. So many off-the-field distractions. This team can't go to a bowl game, yet they have stayed focused on the task at hand every single week. And last week was another example. Their starting quarterback, Tyler Watts, goes down with an injury. Highly touted redshirt freshman Brody Croyle steps in and delivers. He's showing that he's going to be a special player for Alabama down the road. It's a redshirt freshman that on the road and is making his first start. Boy, he came out of the gate throwing the football down the field. Big throw, and then also showing a little bit of versatility down the line of scrimmage, off the line, looking like Tyler Watts here, throwing the ball on the run to Sam Collins for the big touchdown for Alabama. Now, today another test for him. Coming back home, the fans now have expectations. Look for Georgia to throw a variety of looks, try to take away the strength of Bama, which is their running game, and then pressure Brody Croyle. And I'll tell you what, Coach, by pressuring Croyle, they're going to leave themselves vulnerable. You got to be careful. This guy can play.
Boy, there's some excellent points about that. But last week, Alabama, with the leading 17-7 on the Arkansas 42, made a questionable call. At best, they called for a fake punt. Can you believe it? Let's watch what happened. Their punter, Lane Bearden, faked the punt. He ran the ball. He got hurt, and they lost their punter, their holder, and their kickoff man all on one play. Uh-oh. Now, if Georgia wins this football game with the kicking game, Alabama, as staff, is going to second-guess themselves like crazy for that call last week. That could cost them the game today.
He's wearing a brace. He's trying to punt in practice, but they will dress 3 punters among the 80 players they're allowed to, which is a little bit unusual. Much more in this game coming up. Notre Dame, after a crucial week to rest and heal, they remain unbeaten. It's the first time now they're expected to win kind of handily and not rely on late heroics.
Here come the Irish. Here come the Irish.
In a foot race. Touchdown, touchdown, Notre Dame.
And the Boilermakers have been lightning forward again here in South Bend. It's unbelievable.
Batted away, incomplete. Shane Walton with a big play.
Intercepted. Walton at the 45. Walton down at the 40-yard line.
Quick throw. Battle. 50. Battle 45.
Outside 40. 30. Down to the 25. 20. 15. 10. 5. Touchdown, Irish. Ernest Battle from Dillingham.
Irish seated that week to rest, but Ty Willingham had an extra week to field questions about the reunion game with Stanford. On the Cardinals side, there's really a lack of bitterness. Many guys still, treat Willingham like a father figure, even if some do prefer the more laid-back style of Buddy Tevens. Stanford really, though, should need no extra motivation after the defensive undressing in the desert last week. Ugh. The famously stoic Willingham, meanwhile, he will admit that today's game was going to feel a little bit different.
There'll be, I guess, the full gamut of emotion.
Playing Notre Dame is one thing, and then playing your old coach, you put them together, and it's mixed emotions.
These are guys that I went into their homes, recruited them.
Ty Willingham, discipline and focus.
I think it hurt the moms more than it did us. I get home, drive home after the bowl game, and, to find out that he's gone, my mom's in tears. I do a pretty good coach dub impersonation. He goes, tail. In the battle between the rock and the stream always wins.
But hopefully taught those guys or left something with them of a competitive instinct. And therefore, I'll have to display that same competitive instinct when it comes 1:30 on Saturday afternoon.
I think rock versus stream. Corso had the rock plus the points, was a loser there. That's a pretty good Ty Willingham impression. There's going to be some real emotions, though, in that sideline.
Well, Chris, I know how Tyrone Willingham felt in his last game he coached when he coached against his alma mater, Michigan State. I took the University of Louisville to Tallahassee, Florida in 1970 to coach against my alma mater, Florida State. It was one of the most emotional games I've ever coached in. Now, Kirk, here's another situation. The emotional roller coaster that this man is going to feel when he looks across the field and sees the players that he recruited trying to beat him. That, my friend, has got to be an uh-oh.
Did you win? Did you
No, I got beat 9-7.
Close though.
That was nice.
Battle.
Closer than the experts thought.
That's what I like to see. Let's face it, Tyrone Willingham could be competing against a family member. When the ball goes up in the air, he's going to be locked in. It's going to be all business. On the other side, that's going to be the interesting thing to watch. Stanford coming off a humiliating loss against Arizona State. This is a chance for them to revive this program, and I think they're anxious to play against anybody. It happens to be their former coach. I equate this to kind of like your dad showing up to a Little League game and you see him in the stands. You want to go out and play well because your dad's there. Give that extra effort, and that's how Stanford's going to play today, playing against Tyrone Willingham.
Home team in this series has won the last 6. Quarterback issues interesting on both sides. We'll talk more about that coming up on a visit with Pat Dillingham, the ex-walk-on guy who, of course, beat Michigan State with the heroics last week. A lot more on the SEC battle. The $1 Million Band, or at least $50,000 worth, have showed up here. Straight ahead, we'll talk about the fallout at Nebraska. Wow. What can you say? The Big Red Nation is in shock. Down in Miami, the Hurricanes ranked #1, looking pretty scary. The coach at UConn trying to find the words to give his guys some hope
Somebody
today.
told me today we're 46-point dogs, 46-point underdog. To me, that you're Rodney Dangerfield. You got no respect.
Today's show, presented by Discover Card. Want to appear on Game Day this New Year's Day? Visit discovercard.com for details. Tradition, brought to you by the Tostitos Tournament of Champions, the 1955 Oklahoma Sooners, or the 1969 Texas Longhorns. Who's the best ever? Vote on ESPN.com, and you could win a trip to the Tostitos Fiesta Bowl.
We've got our new tradition of grilling wherever we go. You come down to here, you got to have the authentic charcoal barbecue. Get a slab of ribs on there, fellas. Herbie, easy. We still got a show to do. You know, it would take a full-time researcher around the clock to create all the graphics to do justice to Nebraska's shortcomings so far. Ranked 16th in rushing. That would be great for a lot of programs, but it's a disaster for Big Red. Production off almost 100 yards a game from last year, $130 from 2 years ago. McNeese State, pretty good run defense, but pretty good for 1AA. Return today of Thunder Collins from a 4-game suspension. Not really the remedy you need for that running game. Jamal Lord retains his job at quarterback. The bigger news, the replacement of 4 defensive starters. But while the lineup is fiddled with, is Rome burning? Has the empire crumbled? 5 games removed from the BCS title game. The Cornhusker faithful are asking themselves, a generation has gone by since they've had back-to-back regular season losses, or an 0-1 start in a conference, or a top 25 without Nebraska. In a state where farming and football rule, and it's been a pretty bad year for farming, the frequent beatings are certainly testing the folks' famous patience.
There's not a whole lot more to do in Nebraska than watch Huskers on Saturday game days.
Play fake, Wallace running for the pylon, touchdown! Let the party begin. And it's never pleasant watching a dynasty crumble, but that's what's happened over these last 4 road games for Nebraska.
That's why the state's kind of in a panic mode right now, and kind of wondering which direction this program is going.
Ah, hear that? Things have gotten so bad in Husker Nation that
people are just irritated. They don't know what's going on. They're wondering why the players aren't living up to the standards that Nebraska fans have for them.
I think the defense needs to go to, landmines and punjabi sticks. I mean, they can't do anything right. We're not just getting beat. We're getting thumped.
I'll tell you what the problem is, sir, is I think that Nebraska's quarterback is mind-defying.
Okay. Things have gotten so bad in Husker Nation that
I think the last 2 games, people have been embarrassed with the way they played. Frank didn't like to hear embarrassed, but I'd say it's pretty close to being embarrassed.
Embarrassment to me is the wrong word. If they ever stepped on the field without the belief they were going to win, then I would be embarrassed as a coach. Embarrassing is more along the lines of actually giving up and quitting and, kind of hang your helmet up and just, folding. That's something that this team won't do.
But things have gotten so bad in Husker Nation that
if we don't have a winning season, that somebody's going to go, and it'd have to be Solich.
When Tom Osborne was here, we had a lot better team. and I don't think that Frank Solich is living up to what our expectations of him are.
How much does this bother you that you're getting so much heat? You're 3-2, but you're not what you've been, and I don't feel threatened to say that 4 games, to say that a season makes or breaks a program or a coaching staff. You know, I don't buy that.
You hear that? Things have gotten so bad in Husker Nation that here on the outskirts of Lincoln, Paul Pack's Husker Bell has practically been silenced.
Yeah, in recent years when we were scoring 40 to 50 points a game, we had 70-year-old ladies running out of the bar to ring the bell first every time we scored. This year it's kind of rusting out. But for old time's sake,
Things have gotten so bad in Husker Nation that
They need to build their confidence, get together, have some lunch, and you know what? What's up, Nebraska?
They'll ring that bell in future years, but, you know, starting with the Colorado game, 4 woodshed beatings against quality teams. They lost to a couple pretty good teams last year. They're losing to Iowa State, Penn State. Those are okay teams. They're not great teams. We've said a lot about Nebraska. We want to bring in our colleague, Trev Alberts, to really kind of break down how the Huskers have gotten so bad so quickly, Trev. I know they lost Crouch and Wisterman, some guys, but that's what fans want to know.
Chris, I think it's a combination of 3 factors. First of all, I do think the talent level is down, but that's not the whole issue. There's still speed, there's still talent on that football team. Secondly, I think it's been a combination of errors virtually in every play. I mean, linemen going the wrong way, quarterback going the wrong way, 10 penalties versus Iowa State. You know, I think it's safe to say right now maybe an undisciplined football team. But third, and I think most important, is the attitude. I mean, we've seen the impact of attitude across the nation at Notre Dame, maybe at Cal, Kentucky. I think the impact that attitude right now has on Nebraska's team, the combination of those 3 factors, this team is just not very good and not playing very well right now.
Trev, I think the big thing is going to be, first of all, I think we're all tired of talking about Nebraska and what's happening with Nebraska. We knew that this team had issues going back to preseason camp in August. You know, they were exposed against Miami last year, lack of speed on defense. The one-dimensional attack was okay at times because Eric Crouch made up for a lack of the creativity on that offense. Now you get into a point where they don't have Eric Crouch. They don't have the ability to stretch a defense. They don't have a threat with a passing game. And teams today, Trev, as you know, they're putting 10 guys up at the line of scrimmage and saying, hey, you're going to have to beat us by throwing the football. And right now, Nebraska, they're just not capable of doing that.
And here's what the Nebraska fans would say, Kirk, to debunk that theory is simply, look, less than 1 year ago, we beat a very fast Oklahoma team 20-10. I mean, we won the national championship versus Miami when they had Warren Sapp and Ray Lewis, and all we were was one-dimensional. We ran the football. So I think it's still a combination. I mean, you can still run the foot. Look at Oklahoma right now. I mean, they're complaining they can't run the football enough. You have to run the football. You have to play great defense. And right now there is a lack of talent in Lincoln. But I think the combination of those things, a lack of talent, lack of discipline, and right now a lack of a good positive attitude has that team a very average football team.
Well, I think you're right. The attitude is going to be tested more so in the coming weeks, but I guess I disagree when it comes to the theory in college football. Nebraska's option attack in the 80s and 90s was very effective, but guys, today, with the parity in college football, the way the scholarships are spread out more evenly, and the defense is so complex, I don't think you can have a one-dimensional option attack as well as Nebraska executes and still be effective. You have to have just at least a threat of throwing the football.
Let me tell you what I think is going to happen.
Okay.
No matter what the Nebraska record is the rest of this year, I think Frank Solich will be allowed to coach the Nebraska team for at least 1 more year. And then this year, watch for wholesale, and I mean wholesale changes on his staff. He cannot afford to stand pat with his record with that staff. And Chris, I'm telling you, he's going to have to make some decisions that are going to hurt him emotionally, and he's going to be hurting, but he's got to make them if he's going to be the football coach in Nebraska.
You have to make tough decisions as a coach. The boosters in Nebraska are still very much behind Frank Solich as a head coach, though. We're going to table this issue for a couple weeks, but when they play at A&M, home Texas, and at Kansas State within 4 weeks, it's going to come up again. So
okay, down the road.
I mean, just saying, get ready.
2 or 3 weeks.
1 more year.
Just put them on there.
All right. We're going to talk some Big Ten. We thank Trev for now, and we'll talk Maurice Claret's fear of flying coming up. Big showdown in Madison. Penn State visits Grossman against Manning. It's a quarterback showdown in the SEC, and of course, plenty more on Georgia and Alabama. Coach Fran will join us coming up.
College Game Day is presented by Discovery Card, proud sponsor of college football's premier pregame show.
That was not Coach Franchione's house, but it could be. That belongs to the school president. Coach Fran joins us. A very special atmosphere here, ready for the SEC home opener. I want to ask you, I heard a great story about your positive attitude in the face of those NCAA sanctions, a pep talk from your wife about a chance to do something special this season.
Well, that's exactly how it happened. I'm usually a pretty positive guy, but that Friday that everything came down, there was about 48 hours that was a little tough, and about Sunday afternoon, Kim says, that's enough of this. You need to get back to being yourself. And she said, just think how special these young men are, and maybe even you can create a special place in Alabama football history. And I said, you know, that's a good way to look at this, and that started the wheels turning for us.
Coach, looking at this ball game simply, do you think that Alabama's brute force against Georgia's finesse is the secret to this football game?
Well, I think the success of our brute force, because it's going to be a physical game from our standpoint, and every game we've played in has been that way, and we have done very well with that style of play. And if we're going to win today, it's going to be with our offensive and defensive line taking control of the line of scrimmage.
Very good.
Coach, last week, Tyler Watts, one of your great leaders, had an injury to deal with, and a redshirt freshman, highly touted, Brody Croyle, stepped up and not only performed, but he performed well and kind of gave a glimpse of the future of Alabama football. Your thoughts on the quarterback situation coming into this game against Georgia?
Well, he gets healthier every week because Brody gets another week of experience under his belt. We know he's going to be a very fine quarterback. He shows us that every day in practice. And the big advantage that he had, I think, in addition to being talented, as we talked last night, as he came in January, he's had 2 spring practices already. He's gotten to watch Andrew Zhao and Tyler Watts for a long time. So when he stepped in, it was much more comfortable feeling for him. Tyler has been a great leader in his place and gives us a different dimension, so people have to prepare for both of them.
Lee's very concerned about your punting game. Are you going to hold your breath every time you have to go back and punt the football?
I hope we don't have to punt. That's the best answer.
That is the best strategy. Just to thank you for your time.
We had a game like that.
They remember punt, Bama punt here. All right, thanks, Coach. We'll talk to Big Ten now. Following game day, Iowa tries to protect home turf to go 2-0 in the Big Ten against the Boilermakers. Hogs and Vols are into an often wild and weird rivalry tonight in primetime on ESPN. But for a Boilers-Hawks preview, to Mark Jones and Bob Davey in Iowa City. Guys?
All right, it's homecoming week here at Iowa City, and the excitement is tangible and palpable. The reason why, well, fourth-year head coach Kirk Ferentz has everybody excited about his team. They come in with a record of 4-1, and Bob Davey, last year, quarterback Brad Banks showed flashes of brilliance. This year, they're common.
Mark, Brad Banks is in his first year as a starter, but he's a senior and is playing with tremendous amount of confidence right now. He's first in the Big Ten in passing efficiency. Last week against Penn State, he threw for 4 touchdowns to 4 different receivers. He's also athletic, and he can hurt you running the football. He's third on Iowa's team in rushing offense.
Meanwhile, Purdue comes in with a record of 3-2. The latest in a long line of prolific quarterbacks is Kyle Orton.
When you think of the most recent Purdue quarterbacks, you think of Drew Brees. But Kyle Orton started last year as a true freshman, and he's a different style. He's tall, he has a great arm, and is much more of a drop-back passer. He's getting better each week, and he has a great future at Purdue.
Purdue looking for their 3rd straight win against Iowa, but Iowa fans getting their kicks any way they can. Back to you guys.
Mark, thank you. Iowa seems to like those shootouts, in part because their defense has trouble stopping people. Do you see another wild one?
Yes, I do. And Iowa's quarterback Brad Banks was red hot last week against Penn State. He threw for 260 yards and 4 touchdowns. Kirk, I see the same kind of performance from him. I think Iowa beats Purdue in a shootout.
I don't know about a shootout. I think everybody's talking about the 2 offenses coming into this game. I think it's the defense that show up that will really win this game. The fact it's in Iowa City favors the Hawkeyes, but look at Purdue's defense. They have been magnificent this year, and their defense will keep them in this game. I think Purdue will challenge Iowa more so than Penn State did defensively.
Well, on the flip side of Iowa, you got Penn State coming off the overtime loss on the road in the most hostile setting in the Big Ten. That'd be Camp Randall in Madison, Wisconsin against the Badgers. First test for Alvarez's team, which really was kind of lucky early, but has certainly been improving. Lee Evans has been improving, but the record-setting receiver still not medically cleared to return as of yesterday. For Penn State, this is check-em-out time. That gut-wrenching loss, vital conference game now with Michigan up next. The road opener for the opened-up offense of Jopa, J-Pa, and Fran Ganner. Zach Mills in the crowd. He's got to cope with that, get the ball to the Johnsons. that Wisconsin defense, Lee, when you look at them on paper, they're not imposing. They start 6 sophomores back there, 3 sophomore DBs. Their linebackers don't have a sack. It doesn't look great on paper, but they play pretty good.
Boy, do they play well. You know, Wisconsin's defense is one of the best in the Big Ten. And you add to that wonderful special teams, and you can see why the Badgers are 5-0. Now, 2 players in those key areas are as follows. Number 12, Alex Lewis. He's a new junior college inside linebacker. He's quick as a cat. And number 18, Jim Leonard. He's a tough punt returner. I like the way he runs straight up the field with his punt returns. He averages over 12 yards per return. I like him. Now, I think Penn State is going to lose a little bit from that emotional loss to Iowa. So I think that, and the fact that they're playing at Camp Randall with all those great Wisconsin fans, I'm picking Wisconsin to beat Penn State.
You're right about this defense. If you go back to the beginning of the year, Wisconsin returning a 4-year starting quarterback, an offensive line that Barry Alvarez might be his best ever. Great running back, Anthony Davis. You knew that would be a strong point, but I've been really surprised by this youthful defense, how intense they've been, and their ability to create turnovers. It's one of the best defenses in the nation as far as that's concerned. They lead the nation in turnover margin, and I think that is the key to this game. Chris touched on it. Zach Mills on the road for the first time this year with the great athletes that Penn State's offense has to offer against this defense. I give the advantage to Wisconsin because they're playing at home. Exactly. The crowd noise, the turnovers they will create. Wisconsin will win. It's going to be a very close game. Very good game, but Wisconsin's defense will find a way to get it done.
You both like Wisconsin.
Yes,
you both like that offensive line at Wisconsin.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're man enough to use the theme to block Michael Haynes. 5.5 sacks out of Penn State's total of 7. Yeah. I've had a lot of success with the double not so fast. I got you on Virginia Tech. I kind of got you on Iowa. I kind of got you on Iowa last week.
Okay.
I'll go for Penn State, double not so fast.
Mark it down.
A month into the season here, you guys realize that 7 of the preseason top 10 have lost, and already the 8 teams from the BCS Bowls of last year already more combined losses, 13 of them, than they had all of last year. Tony Barnhart checks in now from over at the Chimes. He's anxiously awaiting the release of the first BCS standings. I know you can hardly wait, Tony. What do you got this morning?
I can hardly wait. Oh, goodness gracious. You know, guys, normally when we get to October, teams pretty much know what they can and they cannot do. But this week, we talked to some players and coaches that said today, you know what, they're still looking for a missing piece of the puzzle. Let's start with Ohio State and their great runner, Maurice Clarett. Clarett's early success has put Coach Jim Tressel in a bind when it comes to his more experienced backups, particularly talented sophomore Lydell Ross. Ross, who had 130 yards against Cincinnati, said he was frustrated when he only got 2 carries last week against Indiana. Tressel said he wants to keep Ross involved, but said he will do what is best for the team. Today against Texas Tech, Texas A&M coach R.C. Slocum said he wants to build on last week's 444-yard explosion under new offensive coordinator Kevin Sumlin. Slocum told me that Sumlin's play calling was a breath of fresh air and said his receivers, led by Jamar Taylor, are playing their very best of the season. Arizona State rookie quarterback Andrew Walter said he is anxious to prove that last week's 414-yard performance against Stanford was not a fluke. Stanford said the key today against North Carolina is taking advantage of the defense if it over-pursues ace receiver Sean McDonald. Today against Arkansas, Tennessee will be looking for its lost running game, which is ranked 10th in the SEC, and the Vols will have to do it without the injured Cedric Houston. Quarterback Casey Clausen said he expects the running game to be fine with Jabari J-Train Davis. Then after 2 tough weeks against Florida and Rutgers, the Vols are now ready to make some noise in the SEC race. Guys, now another team looking to find something today is Ole Miss, and mostly they're looking for some guys who can tackle. Defensive coordinator Chuck Driesbach told me that his team missed 27 tackles against Vanderbilt last week. Now they better get that figured out because today the mighty Gators from Florida come to Oxford. Chris?
Largest crowd ever in Oxford, Tony, and the highest-ranked Ole Miss opponent in 7 years. Grossman, Eli Manning, the top 2 rated passers in the SEC. And according to Mel Kiper, he told us last night, both juniors very likely to come out, which is a bit of a surprise. And he thinks be drafted very highly.
Yeah, he told us Eli maybe a potential top 5 pick. We'll have to see if he comes out. Now, looking at the Florida defense, this looks like a completely different defense than what we saw against Miami. Talked to John John Thompson, their defensive coordinator, and he said there are two reasons. Number one, leading up to that Tennessee week, with all the questions surrounding their program, it really brought this team together, and the players realized the value of playing as a team. And the second thing is they've streamlined that complex scheme. Just they're turning their athletes loose, and they're playing much faster. With all that said, don't be shocked to see Eli Manning have some success. He hasn't been sacked all year. They get rid of the ball quickly. Ole Miss will score early in this game and keep it close, but in the second half, Florida's just too athletic. They'll pull away and beat Ole Miss by a couple scores.
Well, Kirk, remember, Ole Miss's defense has given up 80 points in the last 2 ball games, and they got the Gators coming into town. Florida's the #1 passing team in the SEC, but I think they use a balanced offense. They score in the 40s and win by 3 touchdowns. Florida's coming back.
All right, you got them big.
Yes, sir. Big.
Back to Arkansas, Tennessee here. Neither team can afford a second SEC loss. The Vols are 80th in rushing. I mean, that's just hard to comprehend. They're not facing the greatest run defenses either. We're going to find out if Clawson to Washington alone is good enough to beat Arkansas tonight. They might have to find out.
Well, Chris, one thing they found out last week in the first half against the mighty Rutgers defense, they used 2 tight ends in the I formation, and they had 63 yards and 7 points. That's not good enough for Tennessee. So in the second half, you know what they did? 4 wideouts, 1 running back, throw the ball, balance. They used it in the entire game, and I think they're going to start off this ball game in that 4 set. I think they're going to continue to do it. I think they're going to score a lot. I think Tennessee's back. I think they're going to be a very good football team as the season goes along, especially with this offense.
You know what Tennessee has to do, though? Get back to having an aggressive attitude. I don't care what play they call. Offensively, this has not been a Philip Fulmer football team, and I think it's more about what's upstairs than the plays that are being called. Beyond executing better today against Arkansas, as Lee says, roll up your sleeves and get after Arkansas and become more aggressive. We have not seen that in the last 2 weeks, and I think tonight you'll see it regardless of the play calling. I think you'll see go back to being a Philip Fulmer type of team.
You going with Tennessee?
Yes.
So am I.
Well, they better get back to something. 63 yards against Rutgers in the first half.
7 points.
Tennessee, Rutgers.
Coming up, we're going to State University, New Jersey.
That was last
all right. It's a new week. You're hoping.
Come on.
We're going to talk to a legendary running back from either side, Sean Alexander, Herschel Walker, plus the Georgia hero of the play on Rocky Top, immortalized by Larry Munson's great call.
Tennessee playing what amounts to a 4-4 fake. And there's a touchdown! Touchdown, my God, a touchdown! We threw it to Haynes. We just stepped on their face with a hobnail boot and broke their nose. We just crushed their face.
Well, Thursday, midnight Eastern time, 11 o'clock Tuscaloosa time. The season inside the SEC this week, Alabama. A great look at the buildup for this big showdown with Georgia. Our weekly check of the alums of the host school of Game Day. Seal Award makes the list. Someone who did not make the list, who should have, our Reese Davis, joining a distinguished group there. The last guy. We got some distinguished alums from these 2 schools here. Sean Alexander, the Seahawks have a bye week, the hottest running back in the NFL, and of course the great Georgia legend Herschel Walker. I want to ask you, we got to start with this guy. It's his home turf, Herschel. What was the bigger thrill? Monday Night Football, 5 touchdowns in the first half against Minnesota, or beating Florida in the swamp, running for touchdowns against the Gators, and then beating them again for the SEC championship?
You know, they were both special, but I think you got to go with the pros because it's such a higher level. But you can't ever, I will never forget the memories that we had of beating Florida in the swamp and breaking their 30-game win streak.
Herschel, you, of course, had so many great memories in college. You never got a crack at those great Alabama defenses, though. Would you have loved to run up against the Crimson Tide in your era?
Well, I'm glad I never got a chance to play them. I may not have played so well if I played Bama.
Hey, let me ask you, a lot's been made of Pat Dye's comments, another Georgia alum, saying the Bulldogs aren't man enough to handle Alabama up front. Now, in your day, that question never would have been asked. Is this Georgia group man enough today?
Well, you know what? All my life, that's all I've been hearing, that Georgia not man enough to do anything, but we end up winning championships and SEC titles.
There you go.
It is unusual if we're not man enough, what that make to other people.
Hey, Sean, I want to ask you, can you believe this guy here is a star of yesteryear? Look, I don't know who's the active player. Is you or him? You look at you guys.
Game next week. I'm like looking at him.
Well, no, I was trying to be like him. I've seen him on Monday Night Football. I said, I want to be like Sean.
This guy's actually contemplating a comeback, what, in martial arts and in the bobsled?
Bobsled, I know.
Well, see, I got to do something. I said, you know, this is football here. I got out of NFL, and I wanted to come back to college, but it's a Herschel, you're too old. You can't do it anymore.
Hey, Sean, I want to ask you about this group of Alabama players. You got a special feeling for them. They were the young guys when you were a veteran here. They've really stuck together in some tough times.
You know what? These guys are strong, and all of them were freshmen when I was there, and I know they know how to win, and I'm just really proud of the D-line, Kenny King and Jeff Jarrett and Kendall Moorhead. They control the whole line of scrimmage a lot of times, and they do this today. It's going to be a great win for us.
Very quick prediction. I assume you like the Crimson Tide here?
No doubt.
Herschel, you're going to stick with the Dogs?
Well, I got to go with the Dogs. I think no matter what, I think it's going to come down to the front people. I think the front people are going to tell the story. Whoever controls the line of scrimmage will win this game.
So you're kind of calling them out just like Pat Dye is.
Yeah,
the big guys
calling
up
them
front.
out. I say they got to get it up front.
Sean and Herschel, we thank you for your time. Enjoy the ball game. Great of you guys to stop by. Of course, Georgia's quarterback saga certainly put on hold for this week. DJ Shockley is sidelined, so the job and the burden all fall on David Green. After a semi-shaky September, keep in mind, though, Green is still 5-0 on opponents' home field. And as Bob Holtzman reports, it included a coming out for the ages on Old Rocky Top.
David Green brought us flying down the field. We just stepped on their face with a hobnail boot and broke their nose.
Some quarterbacks never have a game where they get into that situation and they come through.
For a redshirt freshman to come in and take a grasp of the game as well as he did and then execute to the level that he played last year, it was really paramount for us.
Since that time, it's tough to, peak every week like that.
David Green may be a victim of his own success. Last season, he was the SEC Freshman of the Year, and expectations were high.
It's intercepted at the 45-yard line. David Green overthrows this football.
But 4 games into Green's sophomore season, Georgia's offense is last in the SEC in total yards per game.
At one time, I might barely overthrow Terrence, but it doesn't count if you overthrow him. And maybe one time we might get a drop on a big play, and it's just been something like that just over and over that has been killing us.
I think there's been times he's had a little trouble seeing a route here and there, and instead of moving a little bit right or a little bit left, he's begun to run out of the pocket.
Shockley puts on a move, he will score.
The biggest change for Green this season is the presence of freshman phenom DJ Shockley, a quarterback cut from the same mold as Michael Vick. The Bulldogs were rotating the two until Shockley broke his foot 3 weeks ago.
Has that had any effect on David's mental state?
I don't know.
I don't think it was anything that he didn't feel like I was doing. I think he felt like he had 2 good quarterbacks, and he wanted to play us both. And so, it didn't hurt my confidence at all.
We never really divided into camps, and it was Green versus Shockley. That was mostly media.
When he got hurt, what was that like for you? What went through your mind?
Obviously, you do want to be on the field as much as you can, and I was excited to, get more playing time. I didn't want it to be at his expense.
Can David Green still be the guy, even with DJ Shockley here?
I don't see any reason why he can't. He's still just as talented, if not more, because of his experience and knowledge of the system. So, you still have to expect great things out of him.
He has been avoiding the frequent mistakes. Only 3 picks in 117 attempts, 7 touchdowns. But, the production is down, guys. There's a lot of reasons for that. The drop passes, they think they've corrected some of that. But you look for him to play well?
Well, I think he's for Georgia to win this game, David Green's going to have to play well. He's got a great group of wide receivers. And let's face it, we could talk about Musa Smith and his ability to run the ball. But if Georgia's going to win and beat Alabama on the road, David Green has to revert back to the confidence that he had a year ago and throw the football out and spread it around to those great receivers.
I think their offensive line has got to protect him. I think that's the key.
Sure. That's what Herschel said. Once again, the challenge comes back to the guys in front of Green.
That's right.
They give him time. I think there's confidence on that side. We'll come back. We'll talk plenty more about this ball game. We'll visit with the guys who want to tackle David Green. Not those ladies. The D-line at the Tide. Well, if Uga and Big Al had children, it might look something like that. That is a strange breed. Well, the folks down here might love their SEC, but we got to remind them the only conference that has 3 unbeaten teams is the Big 12. It's the first road test for Kansas State. The Cats and the Buffs have each had 2 weeks to brace for this big showdown. El Roberson gets the call. A quarterback wants to use Darren Sproles' quickness against those Buff linebackers. Gary Barnett hoping that 2 weeks of reps will help get Robert Hodge more comfortable with the offense. He told us last night he wants to try to grind it out toe-to-toe, win a defensive struggle here, and create some matchups to hopefully convert some third down plays. In other words, impose CU's personality on KSU's defense.
You look at the Colorado USC game, you just like, wow, you can't believe it was so dominating. And then you look at the UCLA game, and then you're like, well, these guys can really play some football. So I know which team is going to come and play on Saturday. It's definitely going to be the one that played against UCLA.
This game could make or break our season. You know, it's like I hate to refer to last year, but it's kind of like last year when we played Oklahoma. That game pretty much broke our season. And this game could be the exact same way. You know, if we lose this game, it's no telling what'll happen afterwards.
If you want to label an early game a make or break game, CU broke UCLA with the first down runs. They averaged 8 yards a carry. That's amazing on first down, but they can't really expect that today, can they?
Yes, they can. Yes, they can. Because Colorado's going to win this football game with a ball control offense led by Chris Brown, the running back, and a new offensive weapon, the California Junior College All-American Robert Hodge. Now, Colorado's had 13 third and shorts, and Chris has made 11 of them. That's 86% of the time. Now, number 7, Robert Hodge, will be used in a moving pocket to take advantage of what he does, and he runs well. Now, Kansas State is an explosive offense, but I think Colorado's ball control, the fact that they're playing at home, they'll keep this game into the teens. Colorado wins this ball game 18-16 in a mile
of score down.
I'm bringing the score
down. Picking Kansas State to lose again. Interesting. You know, Robert Hodge has some ability to make plays, but let's face it, if Colorado wins this game, it will be the ability of Chris Brown to run the ball, especially on 1st and 10. See, you cannot execute in 2nd and 3rd and long. The guy to watch in that Kansas State defense that are going to match up with Chris Brown is pretty scary. Real scary. Number 56, Terry Pierce, one of the best inside linebackers in the Big 12, if not the country. He's been around for a few years. He knows what to expect in these kind of games, and he loves these kind of games because of his ability to get up and make tackles. And I think Colorado found their confidence against UCLA. And I think they're going to be tough to beat in Boulder. But I'll tell you what, they can't run the ball alone against Kansas State and expect to win. Kansas State wins this game with defense and El Roberson and Darren Sproles' athletic ability. I like Kansas State to keep the dream alive.
Good. And maybe with special teams as well. Terrence Newman, very good punt returner. They've already blocked 3 punts. Jeremy Bloom, the punt returner for Colorado, should be back. But you got to give K-State an edge in special teams. The week before the Red River shootout, Longhorns, Sooners trying to ignore all that hype, focus on the games tonight. Texas hosts Oklahoma State. They won 15 in a row at home. They have not trailed this season. The defensive statistics are absolutely scary, but Rashawn Woods, that receiver that Quentin Jammer couldn't cover in last year's game, is the best weapon they've faced. We'll find out more about Texas' defense.
Yes, we will, and you'll find out they're just as good as advertised, because this number 2 ranked Texas defense is really tremendous. And one of the guys you got to give credit to is the defensive coordinator, Carl Reese. He has blended young talent. 13 freshmen, and South was in the top 22 of Texas defense, and then they got some senior leaderships like Corey Redding. Now watch Redding here, the quickness of getting off the block and then making the tackle. Number 40, watch that. Ooh, but Kirk, this is my favorite. Watch him next week against Oklahoma. He's going to do this all the time. He's going to follow the guy, and then crash that Oklahoma quarterback down. They're going to beat Oklahoma State today because they're doing one thing very smart. They've shown the Oklahoma film over and over again because Oklahoma State beat Oklahoma. But today, Texas, by 3 touchdowns, getting ready to play your Oklahoma team next week.
Yeah, you know what's interesting about these 2 teams, Texas and Oklahoma, people are talking about them overlooking this week's opponent. If Texas does, at least they're at home. And if they can defend Woods, then they're going to win this game. And I'm with you. I think Texas will look good today. Oklahoma, on the other hand, we've been hearing for over a year now that they're going to improve their offense. They're going to improve their running game. Well, they better forget about Texas and worry about showing up this week against Missouri, ready to play on the road at Columbia. You know, in the first game, they opened up 378 yards rushing. In the last 3, they've averaged 79 yards rushing. They better forget about Texas and show up ready to play and get that running game going if they think they're going to have any chance of beating Texas next week.
Well, Missouri's an emotional team. They really need that. It'll be a night game in Columbia. There'll be some emotion there. They have faced a couple of spread offenses. That's the good news. One of them, they got torched Bowling Green. Now, that's the bad news. We'll see if they can show up and play with passion today.
Should I say, I don't know if Oklahoma has what it takes.
They're not mad enough to go into Missouri and win. That's their theme.
Don't listen to them, Texas.
Hey, Baylor, they're trying to end a 29-game conference losing streak against Kansas at home. They're a favorite. If they don't do it, it's going to be tough to win the rest of the year. And that losing streak in the conference could reach 37. Pittsburgh's lost 11 straight at Syracuse. Cal fans, don't worry. They've lost 19 straight to Washington State. We'll mention that a little bit later on in the show.